All right, everyone, welcome back to the Complete Web Dev series. In this chapter, we are talking about object-oriented programming. And in this lesson, we are going to talk about the static keyword and what is static. Now, if you're like me, then you've heard that you should never use static because it's bad. And I think that's just misguided. First of all, if there was something bad in a language that you shouldn't use, I don't feel like they would spend a bunch of time maintaining or adding that feature to the programming language. There are definitely times that you don't want to use a static method or a static variable or property rather, but there are times where it makes total sense. And so I'm going to show you a few instances that you'd want to use a static and how to use it. So let me go ahead and jump over to my screen. Remember, if you are enjoying this, please comment, like, subscribe, and head over to freeskills.life if you want to get some sweet merch like this hat I'm wearing right now. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go back to our index page here where we had this class of building, house, and factory. And let's say that we want to know how many buildings are built total, and we want to have access to that in every one of our classes. Well, the best way to do this is to add a static property in the parent class here. And so what we can do is let's add a public static. So use the keyword static, and then we'll just give it a variable name here, and so we'll call this count, and we'll initially set that to 0. Okay, then what we're going to do is let's go ahead and create a constructor here. So we'll use public function. This is a magic method given to us by PHP, and we'll just do construct. And all we're going to do here is now we're going to set that static count 1+. So every time something's constructed, we are going to add to this count. Now, the way that we would want to do that is we would use a static keyword. So we could either use self or static here. In this case, since we are going to be building houses and factories, it's probably best to use the static keyword, and then you use 2 colons like this. So 2 colons, and then you actually have to use the $sign here instead of the property, because this is not an instantiated object. So here's what we're going to do then. We're going to say static count, and then we're going to set that plus equal 1. And what that's going to do is take whatever the value is of the static count now, and when it's constructed, it's going to add 1 to that. So down here in the bottom of the file now, let's just go ahead and do something. I want to show you that you don't need to even construct one of these to access this static property. So what we can do is we can actually echo. So let's echo building. And then we're going to use the 2 colons and then count, just like this. So let's go ahead now and save and refresh the page. And now you can see that that static property is printing out 0, which is what we expected because we set it to 0 here. But let's go ahead now and let's construct some buildings. So the first thing I want to do here is let's do a new line. And then right here, let's say building 1 is equal to new building. So that will construct that. And then let's go ahead and echo building count afterwards. And we'll do a new line here. And we'll save and refresh. And now you can see that the first echo is still echoing 0. But now that we've constructed one, it is echoing 1. And so we could also access this. So now this when we instantiated this building 1 was created in memory. So let's see what happens now if we echo building 1 : count. And what you're going to find is we're going to have another 1. And that's because whether we're accessing this from any of our classes, this static is shared among all of the classes. You can think of this as a shared property that isn't part of these instantiated objects, but you can access it through. The way that I like to think of it is this is actually a variable on the class or the blueprint itself. So in this instance, imagine you had some floor plans, and on the back of the floor plans, you just put a little check mark or a tally every time you built a building from those floor plans. And then any building could have access to its blueprints and look at how many of those buildings have been built from those. So that's one instance. If you need a variable that's accessible by all classes and it's maintained. So let me show you, then you want to use the static property, but let me show you something else. If I do, let's go ahead and do house1, and we're going to set this equal to new house. And then let's echo building count. Spelled that wrong. There needs to be an I there. So I'm going to save that, and we'll refresh now. And that's confusing because I didn't put a new line. So let me just go ahead and put a new line here. And now what you can start to see is that the second one that I instantiated here, this house, this actually had access to this building as well, and because there was no child constructors, the child class actually inherited this construct down, and because this was set to static here, and let's just try this because I'm actually curious if this will work. If you set that to self now instead of static, okay, it still works. So you can use self or static. They are different, but there may be an instance where you need to use static over self, but we'll leave it at self because this is the most common way that you're going to see accessing this building here. Now, what happens now if let's go ahead and put a new line here, and just to prove a point, I'm going to go ahead and echo our first building 1. So we're echoing building 1 here after it's instantiated, and so this will be equal to 1. And then we create this new instantiation here, and when we echo it out, it's equal to 2. But what happens if we go back now and we look at building 1? What do you think? Go ahead and leave a comment and let me know what you thought was going to happen here, because what I'm going to tell you is going to happen is it's still going to be 2. So even though it printed out 1 up here when we did it, right here, it's going to print 2 here because static is shared. Let me save that. And there you go, there's the other 2. Static property is shared, and all of these, it's accessing the same variable. So whether we're using any of these child components, I can make 100 of these, and they're all going to be in sync with one another because they're accessing it from the class itself. Okay, so now that is a static property, but what about a static method? And this is where it gets a little more controversial, and I've even had people on live streams tell me that, man, I heard you weren't supposed to use static methods and you use them all the time. What's the deal with that? And I'll tell you this, that I think static methods are a great idea if you know what you're doing. First and foremost, they allow you to, if you have a function, let me give you a real world example where I think a static method is perfect. So let's say that you have an ORM, okay, and you are you're gonna find in the database however many rows there are of people, users, whatever, right? And then what you're gonna end up doing is making an array of user models or user objects, okay? Well, you don't need that find method to have an instantiated object to run. And so when you're using the find method itself is going to return some instantiated objects, but you don't need to instantiate an object just to run a method. So that is a perfect time when you wouldn't want to do that. One, that helps it helps performance because every time you instantiate an object, it has to store that object in memory. And so if you can avoid creating another object to store in memory, it's going to help performance. It doesn't have to go through the instantiation process, and it can be used freely. And then also, if you have a function that doesn't need the object to be instantiated, because remember, the whole purpose of an object is to store data and have methods that can manipulate that data within the object. And if you have an object that has no data in it, there's really no reason to have an instantiated object just to use a function, or a method rather. You can use function and method interchangeably. Technically, a method is a function that is inside of an object or used for an object. All right, so let me stop blabbing and show you what I mean here. So let's see. This right here, this public function square foot, this cannot be a static function or method rather, because this requires that it has width and length set inside the object. So this will return the width times the length, and it requires that these are set. So this method here requires an instantiated object to use. But if I were going to create a method that goes along with a building, and let's just say it maybe it does something, I don't know, let's just create something. So you use public, and then what you'll do is you'll use public static function, okay, and then this will be, I don't know, like we'll do this is totally pointless, but let's just do a find. And in this find right here, all we're going to do is we are going to return, let's just do return 1 times 39. This is, man, let's at least make that interesting. Let's do 39 times 39. So this right here has nothing to do with any of the properties that are within this object. But for whatever reason, this method may fit perfectly with this building class, and you want to store it in this building classes just for reusability. So like every time you're going to reuse this class and say in another project, you want this function to be there. Well, you could do that, and then it doesn't require that this be instantiated to use it. So let's go ahead now and show you what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and put a new line right here, and then let's go ahead and use that. So in order to use it, we're just going to say building : find, and we're going to call that just like a method call there. And let's echo the result of that. So I'll hit save there, and let's go back now and refresh, and now we get 1,521. Now this is a really silly, dumb example. What we could have done is even used our new line function. We could put that in here. So let's go ahead and do that, because we're using that all the time, and you know, it doesn't have anything to do with this building class, but let's just say for whatever reason, anytime I'm going to use this building class, I want to have access to this function, even though this function or method has nothing to do with any of the data in here. Okay, so and then all we need to do here is we would need to say building : new line to run that each time. So it's a little more typing here, but at least now that function lives somewhere. And again, this is not a real world example that I would do, but I just want to show you how this works. So that is how you access and use these static properties and static methods in PHP. Now, when we get to our next project, which is our next chapter, where we're going to build a CMS from object-oriented programming, we're going to make some static functions and static methods and static properties, and you'll see exactly why in a real-world situation you would use it. So I don't really expect you to understand it, but for now, let's just understand that what the static keyword does, and how we access a static property, and how we call a static method. Right here, this building NL. Okay, so if you understand that, you're good to go. And again, just understand that static does not require that the object be instantiated to run. But if I try to do the same thing with the square root function, it wouldn't work. All right, with that, guys, have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.